Have you ever wondered why history's most powerful men seemed to radiate a magnetic energy that transcended the ordinary? Why, when Napoleon Hill studied 500 of the most successful individuals of his time, did he discover they all possessed a common denominator that went far beyond money, education, or opportunities? The answer lies in a force you carry within you right now, an energy that can be your greatest ally or your subtlest destroyer. This force is what Napoleon Hill called transmuted sexual energy. And what you do with it determines not only who you are, but who you can become. Close your eyes for a moment and feel the weight of this revelation. Every time you masturbate without awareness, you're not just releasing physical tension, you're squandering the most precious raw material for building an extraordinary life. Every drop of semen you spill carries not just reproductive cells, but a concentration of vital energy that could be transmuted into genius, charisma, courage, and personal magnetism. This isn't cheap morality or religious superstition. It's profound science disguised as ancestral wisdom. Napoleon Hill discovered that sexual energy is the driving force behind every great human achievement. When you compulsively masturbate, you're doing more than satisfying a momentary urge. You're creating an energetic pattern that resonates through every cell of your body, through every thought you form, through every word you speak. You're teaching your subconscious mind that instant gratification is more valuable than lasting power. You're programming your soul to seek immediate pleasure instead of transcendent achievement. But here's the truth that will cut through all your justifications and rationalizations. When you masturbate, you're not just losing physical energy. You're losing your connection to the deepest aspect of yourself. You're interrupting an alchemic process that happens naturally when you allow this energy to accumulate and transform into something greater. You're choosing to be ordinary when you could be extraordinary. Imagine a powerful river flowing towards the ocean. Now imagine you build a dam not to channel that water towards a power plant that would generate electricity for an entire city, but to create a small pond where you can occasionally swim. That's what happens when you use your sexual energy only for momentary pleasure. You're turning a river into a puddle. Napoleon Hill observed that the most successful men of his era possessed a quality he called personal magnetism. They'd walk into a room and something would shift. People would turn to them. Conversations would stop. Opportunities would appear. It wasn't just confidence or charisma in the superficial sense. It was something deeper, something that emanated from within them like an invisible energy field. And Hill discovered that all these men had one thing in common. They had learned to transmute their sexual energy into personal power. You might be thinking, but this is natural, it's healthy, it's normal. And you're partly right. Sexual energy is natural. Desire is natural. The impulse is natural. But what you do with that impulse is what determines whether you live a life of mediocrity disguised as normalcy, or whether you awaken to your true potential. Compulsive masturbation isn't just a physical habit. It's an energetic pattern that creates a specific form of consciousness, a specific way of being in the world. When you masturbate, you're doing more than stimulating nerve endings. You're activating a cascade of chemical and energetic reactions that affect not only your body, but your mind, your emotions, and your presence in the world. You're releasing dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter of pleasure. But you're also creating a pattern of seeking instant gratification that extends to all areas of your life. You're teaching your brain that easy pleasure is more valuable than difficult achievement. But there's something even deeper happening, something that Napoleon Hill intuited, but that modern science is only beginning to understand. When you ejaculate, you're not just losing bodily fluids, you're losing a concentration of energy that carries vital information, not just for the creation of new life, but for the creation of a new version of yourself. Each sperm carries not only genetic material, but an energetic charge that can be redirected for cellular regeneration, mental clarity, physical strength, and magnetic presence. Hill discovered that when men learned to conserve and transmute this energy, they developed qualities that seemed almost supernatural. They slept less but had more energy. They thought more clearly and made decisions faster. They developed unshakable confidence and an ability to influence others that went far beyond ordinary persuasion. They became magnets for opportunities, for people, for synchronicities that seemed to happen by chance, but were in fact the result of an energetic field they had learned to cultivate. Have you noticed how you feel after masturbating? Not just physically, but energetically. There's a sense of depletion that goes beyond physical tiredness. There's a diminished quality of presence, a scattered ability to focus, a fading confidence. You might rationalize this as just a natural hormonal response, but Napoleon Hill knew it was something deeper. It was evidence that you had wasted an opportunity for transformation. When you compulsively masturbate, you're creating a cycle that goes far beyond the physical act. You're establishing a thought pattern that constantly craves the next gratification, the next hit of pleasure, the next escape from the creative tension that arises when you allow your energy to build. You're teaching your mind that discomfort must be avoided at all costs, that tension must be released immediately, that momentary pleasure is more important than lasting power. But here's the truth that will transform your understanding. That tension you feel, that energy that builds, that force that seems to demand release, it's not something that needs to be eliminated. It needs to be transmuted. It's fuel for your personal transformation. It's the raw material for building a more powerful version of yourself. Napoleon Hill observed that the most creative men, the most brilliant inventors, the most influential leaders all had periods of intense sexual activity, followed by periods of complete abstinence. It wasn't repression. It was conscious transmutation. They had learned to channel this powerful energy into higher purposes. They used the force of sexual desire to fuel their creativity, their ambition, their ability to visualize and manifest goals that seemed impossible to others. When you masturbate without awareness, you're interrupting a natural process of inner alchemy. You're taking gold and turning it into lead. You're taking energy that could be used to create, to build, to transform, and you're wasting it on momentary gratification that leaves you emptier than before. But it's not just about energy conservation. It's about what happens when you allow that energy to build and transform. It's about what happens when you stop seeking pleasure and start seeking power. It's about what happens when you stop being a slave to your impulses and start being the master of your desires. When you conserve your sexual energy and learn to consciously transmute it, you begin to develop qualities that can't be taught in any school or university. You develop personal magnetism. You develop presence. You develop an ability to influence others that goes far beyond the words you speak. You develop access to levels of creativity and intuition that are inaccessible to those who squander this energy on momentary gratifications. Hill discovered that sexual energy, when conserved and transmuted, becomes what he called the driving force of genius. It fuels not only artistic creativity, but creativity in all aspects of life. It fuels the ability to visualize goals and manifest them into reality. It fuels the courage to take calculated risks and the persistence to keep going when others give up. You might be thinking this is too esoteric, too mystical, too far removed from practical reality. But Napoleon Hill was a practical man. He studied practical men who built practical fortunes and achieved practical successes. And he discovered that they had all learned to use this practical force in a way that most people don't even consider. When you compulsively masturbate, you're doing more than releasing sexual tension. You're releasing creative tension. You're releasing the pressure that could be used to generate new ideas, to solve complex problems, to find innovative solutions. You're choosing easy pleasure over difficult growth. You're choosing instant gratification over lasting fulfillment. But here's what fascinates me most about Hill's discovery. He realized that sexual energy, when transmuted, not only enhances creative ability and personal magnetism, it also develops what he called a sixth sense, an ability to perceive opportunities, to sense the intentions of others, to intuitively know what action to take in complex situations. It's as if the conservation of this vital energy opens channels of perception that remain closed to those who waste this force on momentary gratifications. Imagine you have a car battery. Every time you turn on the radio, the headlights, the air conditioning, you're using energy from the battery. If you do this without running the engine, eventually the battery runs out and the car won't work. But if you learn to conserve that energy and use it to power the engine, You not only keep the battery charged, but you also generate more energy than you expend. That's what happens when you learn to transmute your sexual energy. When you masturbate, you're essentially turning on the radio without running the engine. You're using energy without generating energy. You're consuming without producing. You're depleting yourself instead of recharging. And then you wonder why you feel tired, why you lack energy for your projects, why you lack motivation for your goals. Napoleon Hill observed that the most successful men had one thing in common. They seemed to have access to an inexhaustible supply of energy and enthusiasm. They worked longer hours, but seemed less tired. They faced more challenges, but seemed more energized. They took on more responsibilities, but seemed more vital. And the difference lay in how they managed this fundamental force. It's not just about the quantity of energy. It's about the quality of energy. It's about the type of energy you cultivate and how you direct it. When you compulsively masturbate, you're cultivating an energy of consumption, an energy of gratification, an energy of depletion. When you learn to transmute that energy, you're cultivating an energy of creation, an energy of achievement, an energy of expansion. Have you ever noticed how great leaders, artists, and entrepreneurs have a palpable presence? They walk into a room and you just feel something different. It's not just confidence or charisma in the superficial sense. It's something deeper, something that emanates from within them like an energetic field. Napoleon Hill discovered that this magnetic presence was directly proportional to the ability to conserve and transmute sexual energy. When you masturbate, you're doing more than stimulating your body. You're reinforcing thought patterns that seek instant gratification. You're strengthening behaviors that prioritize momentary pleasure over lasting power. You're creating neural pathways that facilitate procrastination, lack of discipline, and an inability to delay gratification for larger goals. But when you learn to conserve and transmute this energy, you're creating different neural pathways. You're developing the ability to delay gratification, tolerate creative tension, and use discomfort as fuel for growth. You're training your mind to pursue lasting fulfillment instead of momentary relief. Hill discovered that the transmutation of sexual energy wasn't just a matter of willpower or moral discipline. It was a matter of understanding. It was a matter of realizing you have a choice in every moment. You can use this energy to fuel old patterns of behavior, or you can use it to create new patterns of excellence. When you masturbate without awareness, you're choosing the familiar over the extraordinary. You're choosing the known over the transformative. You're choosing to remain who you are instead of becoming who you could be. And this choice is made not only at the moment of the act, but in all the moments leading up to and following it. The sexual energy you carry is like a river flowing through you. You can allow that river to flow into the ocean of personal transformation, or you can divert it into small ponds of momentary gratification. You can use this water to power a plant that generates electricity for an entire city, or you can use it to fill a pool where you occasionally swim. Napoleon Hill observed that the most successful men had learned to see sexual energy not as something that needs to be eliminated, but as something that needs to be elevated. They had learned to transform impulse into inspiration, desire into determination, passion into purpose. They had discovered that the same force that drives them toward sexual gratification can be redirected to drive them toward any goal they choose. This doesn't mean repression. Repression is denying the existence of the energy. Transmutation is acknowledging the energy and consciously directing it toward higher purposes. Repression creates tension and neurosis. Transmutation creates power and fulfillment. Repression is fighting against yourself. Transmutation is using yourself as fuel for growth. When you compulsively masturbate, you're essentially telling your subconscious, I prefer momentary pleasure to lasting power. I prefer instant gratification to meaningful achievement. I prefer to be ordinary to being extraordinary. And your subconscious, which is obedient and literal, accepts this programming and manifests it in all areas of your life. But when you learn to transmute this energy, you're sending a different message to your subconscious. I am capable of delaying gratification for larger goals. I am capable of using discomfort as fuel for growth. I am capable of transforming impulses into inspirations. And your subconscious accepts this programming and manifests it as discipline, focus, magnetism, and personal power. Hill discovered that the transmutation of sexual energy wasn't just an individual practice. It was a practice that affected leadership ability, the ability to influence others, and the ability to create wealth and success. Men who had learned to transmute this energy developed a presence that attracted opportunities, people, and resources like a magnet. You might be wondering how this is possible. How can something so intimate and personal as sexual energy have such a broad impact on practical life? The answer lies in the interconnected nature of all aspects of human experience. Your sexual energy isn't separate from your creative energy, which isn't separate from your mental energy, which isn't separate from your emotional energy, which isn't separate from your physical energy. When you waste sexual energy, you're wasting creative energy. When you waste creative energy, you're wasting mental energy. When you waste mental energy, you're wasting emotional energy. When you waste emotional energy, you're wasting physical energy. Everything is connected. Everything is part of an integrated energetic system. Napoleon Hill observed that the most successful men treated their energy as the most precious resource they possessed. They didn't waste it on activities that didn't contribute to their goals. They didn't dissipate it in momentary gratifications that left them weakened. They conserved it, concentrated it, and directed it toward purposes that strengthened and elevated them. When you compulsively masturbate, you're treating your energy as if it were an inexhaustible and valueless resource. You're acting as if you can waste it endlessly without consequences. But Napoleon Hill discovered that sexual energy is finite and precious. Every time you waste it, you're missing an opportunity to use it for something that could transform your life. Here's a truth that may be hard to accept. You don't just masturbate for physical pleasure. You masturbate to escape the creative tension that arises when you have accumulated energy, but lack clarity on how to use it. You masturbate to avoid the discomfort of having power, but not knowing how to direct it. You masturbate to run away from the responsibility of using your energy constructively. Compulsive masturbation is often a form of self-medicating against the anxiety that arises when you have vital energy, but lack a clear purpose. It's a way of avoiding the creative tension that could be used to generate new ideas, solve complex problems, create something meaningful. It's a choice of momentary relief over lasting growth. But when you learn to tolerate that tension, when you learn to use that energy constructively, you discover it transforms into something extraordinary. It becomes fuel for creativity, innovation, and achievements that seemed impossible when you were squandering that energy on momentary gratification. Napoleon Hill discovered that transmuted sexual energy not only increases creative capacity and personal magnetism, it also develops what he called applied faith, an unshakable confidence in one's ability to achieve goals that seem impossible to others. It's as if the conservation of this vital energy nourishes not only the body and mind, but also the spirit. When you compulsively masturbate, you're essentially saying, I don't believe I'm capable of using this energy for something greater. I don't believe I'm capable of transforming this force into real power. I don't believe I'm capable of being extraordinary. And this lack of faith in yourself manifests in all areas of your life as limitation, mediocrity, and lack of fulfillment. But when you learn to transmute this energy, you're affirming, I am capable of using this force for higher purposes. I am capable of transforming impulses into inspirations. I am capable of being extraordinary. And this faith in yourself manifests as courage, determination, persistence, and exceptional achievement. Hill observed that all highly successful men went through periods of intense sexual discipline, not out of morality or religiosity, but because they had discovered that the conservation of this energy was fundamental to the development of their latent powers. They had learned that the same drive that led them to sexual gratification could be redirected to lead them to the achievement of any goal they chose. This doesn't mean they were lifelong celibates. It means they had learned to use sexual energy consciously, whether for the creation of life through reproduction or the creation of achievement through transmutation. They didn't squander this energy on activities that weakened them. They used it for activities that strengthened them. When you masturbate without awareness, you're using the most powerful energy you possess in a way that doesn't generate power. You're using the most creative force you carry in a way that doesn't generate creation. You're using the most transformative impulse you feel in a way that doesn't generate transformation. You're wasting gold and settling for lead. The sexual energy flowing through you at this moment is the same energy that fueled humanity's greatest achievements. It's the same energy that propelled inventors to create inventions that changed the world. It's the same energy that motivated entrepreneurs to build empires that generated prosperity for millions. It's the same energy that inspired artists to create works that touch the human soul across the centuries. You carry within you the same force that created the pyramids, that inspired Beethoven's symphonies, that fueled Leonardo da Vinci's genius, that drove Napoleon Bonaparte's determination. The difference between you and these extraordinary men isn't in the amount of energy you possess. It's in how you choose to use that energy. When you compulsively masturbate, you're choosing to use that energy in a way that doesn't generate greatness. You're choosing to squander the fuel that could power an extraordinary life. You're choosing to remain ordinary when you could become exceptional. Napoleon Hill discovered that the transmutation of sexual energy wasn't just a matter of personal development. It was a matter of human evolution. He observed that men who learned to transmute this energy developed capacities that seemed to represent the next level of human evolution. Greater creativity, greater intuition, greater magnetism, greater leadership ability. He began to realize that the future of humanity might depend on our collective ability to learn to use this energy in a higher way, that the development of a more advanced civilization might depend on the development of individuals who had learned to transmute their most primitive energies into more refined expressions of power and creativity. When you learn to transmute your sexual energy, you're not just transforming your own life, you're contributing to the evolution of human consciousness. You're demonstrating that it's possible to use primitive impulses for higher purposes. You're proving that humanity can evolve beyond instant gratification to lasting fulfillment. Compulsive masturbation is more than a personal habit. It's a symbol of the human tendency to choose easy pleasure over difficult growth, momentary gratification over meaningful achievement, passive consumption over active creation. When you break this pattern in your own life, you're breaking a pattern that limits human potential as a whole. Hill discovered that sexual energy was what he called primary creative energy, the force behind all creation, whether physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. When you squander this energy on activities that don't generate creation, you're squandering your connection to the fundamental creative force of the universe. But when you learn to conserve and transmute this energy, you become a channel for the expression of universal creativity. You become an instrument through which universal intelligence can manifest new ideas, new solutions, new possibilities. You become a conscious collaborator in the ongoing process of creation that moves the universe. The sexual energy you feel isn't just your own. It's an expression of the universal creative energy flowing through you. When you waste this energy, you're squandering an opportunity to consciously participate in the universal creative process. When you transmute this energy, you're aligning yourself with the creative impulse that moves all things. Napoleon Hill observed that the most successful men seem to have access to a wellspring of inspiration and creativity that went beyond their individual capabilities. They seemed like conduits for a higher intelligence that manifested through them as brilliant ideas, transformative insights, and innovative solutions. And he discovered that this channeling ability was directly proportional to their ability to conserve and transmute sexual energy. When you compulsively masturbate, you're essentially shutting down the channels through which this higher intelligence could manifest through you. You're creating static that interferes with the reception of insights and inspirations that could transform your life and the lives of others through your achievements. But when you learn to transmute this energy, you're opening those channels. You're becoming a clearer receiver for universal intelligence. You're empowering yourself to receive and manifest ideas that are bigger than anything you could generate with just your conscious mind. The truth is, you're not just an isolated individual using personal energy for personal goals. You're part of a universal network of consciousness, and the energy flowing through you is part of the energy that moves all of creation. When you use this energy in a high way, you're contributing to the elevation of the entire network. When you waste this energy, you're contributing to the diminishment of the entire network. Hill began to realize that individual success wasn't just about personal achievement, it was about developing capabilities that allowed the individual to contribute more meaningfully to the collective progress of humanity. The most successful men weren't just rich or powerful. They were instruments through which universal intelligence manifested advancements that benefited all of humankind. When you learn to transmute your sexual energy, you're not just developing personal power, you're developing the capacity to serve as a channel for manifestations of intelligence and creativity that can benefit countless other people. You're preparing to be used as an instrument of progress and evolution. The choice you make each moment about how to use your sexual energy is a choice about what kind of person you want to be and what kind of contribution you want to make to the world. It's a choice between remaining at the level of consciousness that seeks only personal gratification or evolving to the level of consciousness that seeks to contribute to something larger than yourself. Napoleon Hill discovered that the most accomplished men had made this conscious and consistent choice. They had decided to use their sexual energy not just for personal gratification, but as fuel for achievements that would benefit future generations. They had chosen to be instruments of creation rather than mere consumers of pleasure. That's the choice that lies before you right now. You can continue using your sexual energy in a way that doesn't generate growth, that doesn't contribute to progress, that doesn't fuel the development of your latent capabilities. Or you can begin to use this energy as fuel to become the highest version of yourself. Transformation doesn't happen overnight. It happens through thousands of small, consistent choices. Each time you feel the urge to masturbate and choose instead to use that energy for something constructive, you're making a transformative choice. Each time you redirect sexual energy into creativity, exercise, meaningful work, or personal development, you're strengthening the neural pathways that make transmutation easier and more natural. Hill discovered that the transmutation of sexual energy was a skill that could be developed through practice. Like any skill, it starts out difficult and clumsy, but with consistent practice, it becomes natural and powerful. The men who mastered this skill weren't superhuman. They were ordinary human beings who had learned to use an extraordinary force in an extraordinary way. The sexual energy flowing through you is like a powerful river. You can allow that river to flow wildly, causing floods and destruction. You can dam it up completely, causing stagnation and death. Or you can learn to channel it, directing its force to generate electricity that lights cities and fuels progress. The mastery of sexual energy isn't about repression or denial. It's about conscious direction and elevated use. It's about transforming impulse into inspiration, desire into determination, passion into purpose. It's about using the most powerful force you possess to create the most extraordinary life you can imagine. When you compulsively masturbate, you're essentially saying, I'm not capable of using this force for something greater. I'm not disciplined enough to channel this energy. I'm not strong enough to transform impulses into achievements. And this limiting belief manifests in all areas of your life as a lack of discipline, lack of focus, and lack of achievement. But when you learn to transmute this energy, you're affirming, I am capable of using this force for higher purposes. I am disciplined enough to channel this energy. I am strong enough to transform impulses into achievements. And this empowered belief manifests as exceptional discipline, laser focus, and extraordinary achievements. Napoleon Hill observed a fascinating pattern among the most successful men. They all went through periods of intense sexual discipline that coincided with their greatest professional and personal breakthroughs. It wasn't coincidence, it was cause and effect. The energy they conserved became fuel for genius, for revolutionary insights, for the courage to take risks others would consider insane. Imagine you have a nuclear reactor inside you. Every time you masturbate, you're releasing this nuclear energy in a way that doesn't generate electricity, doesn't power anything constructive. It simply dissipates the power into wasted heat. But when you learn to control this nuclear reaction, when you learn to channel this energy through the turbines of purpose and discipline, you can generate enough power to fuel an entire city of dreams and accomplishments. Sexual energy isn't just physical energy. It's psychic energy, creative energy, spiritual energy. It's the force that drives life toward reproduction, creation, expansion. When you waste this energy on momentary gratification, you're wasting your connection to the fundamental creative impulse of existence. Hill discovered that when men learned to conserve and transmute this energy, they developed what he called sexual genius, an ability to use sexual energy to fuel all forms of genius: creative genius, entrepreneurial genius, artistic genius, leadership genius. They discovered that the same energy that drove them toward sex could be redirected to drive them toward any goal they chose. You might be wondering, but how is this possible? How can sexual energy be related to financial success, artistic, creativity, entrepreneurial leadership? The answer lies in the nature of sexual energy as a fundamental life force. It's not just about reproduction, it's about creation in all its forms. When you ejaculate, you're not just releasing sperm. You're releasing a concentrated burst of life force that carries not only the ability to create new life, but the ability to create anything. This energy carries vitamins, minerals, hormones, neurotransmitters, and a bioelectrical charge that, when conserved, can be used to regenerate and revitalize your entire system. Napoleon Hill observed that men who practiced sexual transmutation developed distinctive physical characteristics: brighter eyes, more confident posture, a more powerful voice, a more magnetic presence. This wasn't just the result of better physical health. It was the result of a concentrated life force manifesting as vitality at all levels of being. When you compulsively masturbate, you're constantly depleting this life force. You're forcing your body to constantly produce more semen, more hormones, more neurotransmitters, more bioelectrical energy. You're creating a state of chronic depletion that manifests as fatigue, lack of motivation, diminished presence, reduced personal magnetism. But when you conserve this energy, when you allow it to accumulate and transform, you create a state of energetic abundance that manifests as vitality, enthusiasm, magnetism, presence. You become a magnet for opportunities, for people, for synchronicities that seem to happen by chance, but are actually the result of an energetic field you've created through conscious conservation and transmutation. Hill discovered that transmuted sexual energy not only increases physical and mental energy, it also awakens capacities that remain dormant in most people. It awakens intuition, the ability to perceive opportunities before they become obvious, the ability to sense the motivation and intention of other people, the ability to instinctively know which action to take in complex situations. Have you ever had the experience of encountering someone who seemed to have a special presence, a commanding ability that went beyond their words or actions? Someone who walked into a room and changed the energy of everyone present. Napoleon Hill discovered that this special presence was always accompanied by a conscious mastery of sexual energy. When you masturbate unconsciously, you're wasting the opportunity to develop this special presence. You're choosing to remain ordinary when you could become extraordinary. You're choosing to be one more in the crowd when you could be the one who leads the crowd. The transformation that happens when you learn to transmute sexual energy isn't gradual, it's exponential. Each day you conserve this energy, you're not just adding more energy to your system, you're multiplying the energy that already exists. You're creating a compounding effect that accelerates over time. Hill observed that men who practiced sexual transmutation for extended periods reported experiences that seemed almost supernatural. Insights that came as revelations, solutions to complex problems that appeared in dreams, opportunities that manifested in seemingly magical ways. It wasn't magic. It was the natural result of operating with levels of energy that most people never experience. When you compulsively masturbate, you're operating with energy levels that keep you functioning, but not transforming. You have enough energy to survive, but not to thrive. You have enough energy to be ordinary, but not to be exceptional. Sexual energy is like rocket fuel. You can use it to power a regular car, and it will work, but it won't be anything special. Or you can use it to power a spaceship, and it can take you to the stars. The difference isn't in the amount of fuel, but in how you choose to use it. Napoleon Hill discovered that all men of great achievement had learned to use rocket fuel to power spaceships, not regular cars. They had learned that sexual energy, when transmuted, could take them to levels of achievement that seemed impossible when they were wasting that energy on momentary gratifications. You might be thinking, but this seems very difficult. How can I resist such a strong impulse? And Hill would reply, you don't resist the impulse, you redirect it, you don't fight the energy. You channel it. You don't repress the desire, you transform it into determination. Sexual transmutation isn't about denial or repression. It's about recognition and redirection. It's about realizing that the sexual impulse is a manifestation of a broader creative force that can be used for any kind of creation, not just the creation of life through reproduction. When you feel the urge, instead of automatically giving into it, pause and ask yourself, how can I use this energy in a way that strengthens me instead of weakening me? How can I channel this drive towards my goals instead of wasting it on fleeting gratification? Many highly successful men, as Hill observed, made a habit of this pause and this question. They learned to view sexual urges not as something needing immediate satisfaction, but as a potential source of fuel for their ambitions. They redirected sexual energy into intense workouts, creative work, strategic planning, goal visualization. They used the intensity of desire to sharpen their focus on important projects. They transformed sexual passion into professional passion. The key is understanding that sexual energy and creative energy are manifestations of the same fundamental force. Conserving sexual energy automatically boosts creative energy. Wasting it diminishes it. Napoleon Hill noted that the most creatively productive periods of highly successful men always coincided with periods of sexual discipline. This wasn't neurotic repression. It was the conscious channeling of a powerful force towards higher purposes. You can experiment with this in your own life. Next time you feel a strong urge, instead of seeking immediate gratification, channel that energy into something constructive. Hit the gym hard. Work on a creative project. Journal. Plan your goals. Visualize your ideal future. You'll find that redirected sexual energy becomes fuel for any activity you choose. It boosts your focus, intensity, creativity, and determination. It transforms ordinary work into inspired work, ordinary exercise into transformative exercise, ordinary planning into powerful visualization. Hill found this to be a fundamental difference between ordinary men and extraordinary men. Ordinary men used sexual energy solely for sexual gratification. Extraordinary men used it as fuel for whatever goals they chose to achieve. Sexual transmutation isn't some esoteric or mystical practice. It's a practical technology for maximizing the use of your most powerful energy. It's a scientific method for converting primal urges into civilized achievements. Compulsive masturbation is essentially burning rocket fuel to heat your house. It works, but it's a grotesque waste of a force that could be used for far higher purposes. Learning to transmute this energy is like using rocket fuel to power a journey to the stars. Napoleon Hill discovered that the most successful men weren't necessarily smarter, better educated, or more privileged than others. They were men who had learned to use sexual energy as fuel for genius, for creativity, for achievements that seemed impossible to those who wasted that energy on fleeting pleasures. The difference between success and mediocrity isn't what you know, but how you use the energy you possess. The difference between ordinary achievements and extraordinary achievements isn't your innate capabilities, but how you direct your most powerful energies. You have within you right now the same energy that fueled humanity's greatest achievements. The question isn't whether you have this energy. The question is how you choose to use it. You can use it for fleeting gratification that leaves you weakened, or you can use it for lasting achievements that leave you strengthened. Hill observed that the world was full of men of great potential who never realized that potential because they never learned to use their sexual energy constructively. They had all the resources necessary for exceptional success, except the knowledge of how to transform sexual energy into achieving energy. The tragedy isn't that these men failed. The tragedy is that they never knew what was possible. They never discovered that they carried within them a force that could transform them from ordinary men into extraordinary men. They never learned that the energy they wasted on fleeting gratification could be used to build extraordinary lives. You don't have to be one of those tragedies. You can learn what Napoleon Hill discovered. You can apply the principles he identified. You can transform your sexual energy into achieving energy. You can use the most powerful force you possess to create the most extraordinary life you can imagine. The journey of sexual transmutation begins with a simple decision. The decision to stop wasting your most precious energy and start using it consciously for purposes that uplift you. It's the decision to stop being a slave to momentary impulses and start being the master of lasting forces. Each time you feel the urge and choose to redirect it to something constructive, you're strengthening your capacity for transmutation. Each time you use sexual energy as fuel for exercise, creativity, meaningful work, you're developing the muscles of discipline and conscious direction. Napoleon Hill discovered that sexual transmutation wasn't an ability some men naturally possessed and others didn't. It was an ability any man could develop through conscious and consistent practice. It was a technology that could be learned, applied and mastered by anyone willing to invest the time and energy required. The reward for mastering this technology isn't just material success, although that's often a result. The reward is the transformation of yourself into a more powerful, more creative, more magnetic, more achieving version of who you are. It's the discovery of capabilities you didn't even know you possessed. It's the awakening of potentials that lay dormant within you. When you learn to transmute sexual energy, you're not just changing a habit. You're changing your fundamental relationship with energy, with power, with creativity, with achievement. You're evolving from someone controlled by impulses to someone who controls impulses. You're evolving from someone who is a slave to desires to someone who is a master of desires. The sexual energy flowing through you right now is an invitation to transformation. It's an invitation to discover what you're truly capable of when you stop squandering your most powerful force. It's an invitation to become the highest version of yourself. Napoleon Hill spent decades studying the most successful men of his time to uncover the secrets of exceptional success. What he discovered went deeper than techniques or strategies. He discovered that exceptional success arises when you learn to use the most powerful forces you possess exceptionally well. Sexual energy is the most powerful of these forces. When you learn to consciously transmute it, you gain access to levels of energy, creativity, magnetism, and accomplishment impossible for those who waste this force on fleeting gratifications. The choice is before you. You can continue using rocket fuel to heat your home, or you can start using it to power a journey to the stars. You can continue squandering gold and settling for lead, or you can begin transforming primal urges into civilized achievements. The sexual energy you feel isn't just your personal energy. It's a manifestation of the universal creative energy flowing through you. When you waste it, you're wasting an opportunity to consciously participate in the creative process that moves the universe. When you transmute it, you become a conscious collaborator in the creation of a more extraordinary world. The man who masters his sexual energy isn't the one who denies or represses it. He's the one who recognizes it as the most powerful force. He possesses and learns to consciously direct it toward purposes that uplift him and the world around him. He's the one who transforms impulse into inspiration, desire into determination, passion into purpose. This is the discovery that can transform your life. This is the technology that can transform you from ordinary to extraordinary. This is the key that can unlock potentials you didn't even know you possessed. Transmuted sexual energy is the fuel of genius, the source of magnetism, the foundation of exceptional achievement. Start today. Start now. Start with the next time you feel the sexual urge. Instead of automatically seeking gratification, pause, acknowledge the energy, appreciate its power, and then consciously redirect it to something that strengthens you instead of weakening you. Use this energy to exercise your body, to fuel your creativity, to intensify your focus on important goals. Transform sexual passion into professional passion. Convert desire into determination. Transmute impulse into inspiration. This is the journey Napoleon Hill discovered. This is the technology that transformed ordinary men into extraordinary men. This is the force that can transform you from who you are into who you can become. Transmuted sexual energy is the key to unlocking the extraordinary that exists within you.